Arguably, the cultural studies project that had been initiated by a tight-knit group of British leftist scholars. I'm referring to Raymond Williams, Richard Hoggart, and Stuart Hall in the late 1950s, and that paved the ground for the founding in 1964 of the Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies as the first institution exclusively dedicated to that purpose, grew out of the pressing need not to study culture per se. It primarily stemmed from a commitment to, I quote, reconceptualize popular culture as a site of resistance and negotiation for marginalized and disempowered groups, unquote. Actually, the cultural studies endeavor has its roots in what Alan Connor has termed, I quote, political commitment. It came as a theoretically informed project, not only to eliminate the debate over the shifting cultural terrain with the influx of new stocks from the former British colonies and the Commonwealth, but also to craft a narrative that is legible to both academic and non-academic audiences. The question which came then to the fore was, how could cultural studies fulfill its dual mission of being simultaneously an intellectual and a political project? In other words, how could pioneering theorists trigger a genuine cultural practice that could critically respond to a new post-war reality, namely how to construct a paradigm that all at once preserves the British collective identity and way of life, what we mean by Britishness, and makes it possible to recognize and protect ethno-cultural diversity. It remains to ponder over what actually defines cultural studies as, I quote, a variable cocktail of intellectual and political work. To Stuart Hall, I quote again, it does matter whether cultural studies is this or that. It can't be just any old thing which chooses to march under a particular banner. It is a serious enterprise or a project, and that is inscribed in what is sometimes called the political aspect of cultural studies, unquote. Besides its hybrid nature and inherent ambivalences, the roots of cultural studies project were certainly not axiomatic or unequivocal. In effect, cultural studies emergence and growth in the late 1950s and early 1960s was indeed attributable to diverse factors. Certainly not a science structured around a central and unified theme. Cultural studies, theoretical frameworks, and areas of interest were mainly multifocal. Much beyond politics, cultural studies was deeply influenced by the Marxist school of thought and critical theory. Inspired by the writings of influential Marxist thinkers like Italian philosopher Antonio Gramsci and later French theorist Louis Althusser, it has evolved around a number of key concepts, including themes of hegemony, power, ideology, representation, and identity. Even though early cultural studies theorists by no means adhered to the Marxist creed, which they regarded, I quote, as a problem, as trouble, as danger, not as a solution, unquote, they recognized Gramsci's huge influence and colossal contribution to the fashioning and framing of such an area of thought, namely his notions of hegemony and what he dubbed organic intellectual. This ends my first part. Now let me move to the second, which I have titled Institutionalizing Cultural Studies. The debate over the cultural studies project, namely its discursive and multifaceted nature, raised serious questions, not only on how it could flourish as an important branch of knowledge, but especially on how it could be incorporated into academia as a sovereign subject area and engage with other schools of thought. The founding in such a context of the Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies to institutionalize cultural studies as a new discipline and a new research area not only triggered vivid reactions among academicians in the humanities and social sciences who doubted the study of mass culture could ever be taken seriously, but also raised steadfast concerns over its raison d'etre, being originally a political project. Interestingly, questions pertaining to the hybrid character of cultural studies, being at the same time a political and an intellectual enterprise, rose to the surface as contrary to classical subjects taught in the humanities and social sciences. The newly introduced discipline came to cite renowned American studies specialist Pierre Guerlain, who is close friends with the British baby. I quote, un mélange néo-marxiste composé d'un zeste de Lacan, 2 doses de Derrida et beaucoup de Stuart Hall, mélange dont la cohérence laisse à désirer. Unquote. In addition to its diverse origins, multi-layered discourses, and disparate trajectories, cultural studies should, according to Hall, be viewed as a multi, inter, or even non-disciplinary scholarly area. As put by Barker, I quote, cultural studies does not speak with one voice. It cannot speak with one voice. And I do not have one voice to represent it. End of quote. The steadfast refusal of cultural studies theorists to conceptualize their own project area in clearly stated terms, to map out its core contents, and notably to set up protective walls around it so as to maintain its oneness, further impeded their quest for full academic recognition, but by no means prevented their project from maturing into a sovereign discipline. Uncertainties with regard to cultural studies labeling and scientific positioning are better exemplified by a wide range of francophone universities which, among the diverse designations, opted for the hybrid epithet history and civilization. While both academic spheres appear tightly interwoven, as incontestably every research in civilization needs a historical context, And every investigation in history gains in substance interacting with civilization. For a number of history specialists, the civ history track, as taught and researched in English departments, has nothing to do with history as an autonomous subject. And the concept civilization seems hazy and much more difficult to define. For Gerlin, who considers cultural studies more as a toolbox in what outil than a self-contained subject area, teaching history by a non-specialist amounts to writing a press article by a freelance journalist who, to seduce his readership, generally conveys unchecked information that is devoid of any scientific or intellectual substance, and that by no means is anchored in a specific historical context. Notwithstanding, whilst he unenthusiastically endorses the view that makes of cultural studies, I quote, a bastard discipline, une discipline bâtarde. Gerlin, nevertheless, highlights the role of civ history practitioners as full-fledged actors capable of enhancing research and scholarship. He contends, I quote, peut-on nier aux bâtards le droit à la pensée ou à mettre en doute l'originalité de leurs recherches sur la base d'un rejet de leur généalogie? Unquote. I'll move to the last section of my paper today, the thorny issue of methods. How much time is that? 8 minutes. 8 minutes, okay, that should be okay. So undertaking research can be both a difficult and rewarding activity. In addition to accuracy, which has long been a standard benchmark in any piece of scientific inquiry, reliability, validity, and authenticity have often been recognized as highly regarded indicators of any sustainable research activity, regardless of the area of expertise or the subject it investigates. Paradoxical as it might appear, the question of methods as a prerequisite for any viable investigation has long been a neglected dimension in cultural studies, both in data collection and data analysis. Not only empirical inquiry has often been treated with suspicion, as emphasis has rather been placed on textual analysis and theory construction, but specialists themselves seem quite reluctant to offer constant reflection on an issue that could no longer be overlooked, notably that the purpose of doing research far exceeds any theory, extrapolation, or refinement. The issue of methodological consistency as an intrinsic component of any scientific endeavor becomes especially acute when the investigated matter touches upon a multidisciplinary domain that requires special expertise, not only in a single and unique research area as it is the case for peer fields, but also presupposes full command over diverse research tools and expert knowledge difficult to come to grips with or to handle. I quote, there's no simple answer to the question of how to do cultural studies, unquote. And there is no such a thing as, I quote again, cultural studies methodology. In the same way, Hall justifies the deliberate choice of a flexible methodological line that is not only reflective of cultural studies' diversified core contents, but also permits to cross interdisciplinary borders for the sake of amassing and interpreting rich cultural data. To carry out research and produce rigorous scholarship and richly constitutionalized knowledge, cultural studies experts opted for qualitative research methods, including, amongst others, ethnography, case study, field research, semiotics, and discourse analysis. For instance, meant basically to gain insight into the hearts and minds of people, ethnographic inquiries employ empirical techniques that place lived experience ahead of theoretical extrapolations, and that rely exclusively on evidence obtained through participant observation, in-depth interviews, questionnaires, and documents and texts. Alongside ethnography, semiotics is another chief method applied by cultural studies researchers, even if today it is less and less utilized due to its exclusive focus on language. To semiologists, because culture is structured like a language, cultural meaning is generated through fixed binary pairs. Yet, assessing people's attitudes, behaviors, and feelings, in addition to being subjective and occasionally biased, could by no means permit to reach definitive conclusions. Additionally, asking open-ended questions to evaluate their impressions and viewpoints could but produce approximate, arbitrary, if not scientifically invalid results. I will stop, please. I will come now to the conclusion, some concluding remarks. Now, looking ahead to the future, it is pertinent to assert that carving out a niche in a knowledge-imbued environment entails taking a number of risks, namely how to trigger a judgment of originality on behalf of an academic community that is still striving to articulate its status as full-fledged actors in the curriculum design and scholarship. We presume some action should be undertaken with regard to the teaching of cultural studies at our English departments, so as to synchronize pedagogical efforts across the national institutions. Beyond the quest for scientific attainment and recognition, there is a compelling need, we suppose, for intensive collaboration to rethink traditional teaching methods, especially keep abreast of constantly evolving curriculum design and research methods. Aside from setting up clearly defined guidelines to transcend the multifaceted character of such a discipline, much effort must be gathered to build confidence and reinforce among practitioners in the field a sense of belonging very much needed in their respective area. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Hafsa, for this very insightful speech, which sends us to clear feeling enthusiasm for the discipline, a mixture of in-depth knowledge and critical perspective towards it, and a lot of thoughtful and thought-provoking issues on the mapping of cultural studies, its methodology and teaching perspectives as an academic discipline. Thank you very much for that. Now, I would like to welcome the audience to interact with both speakers, and the floor is yours now for questions. So,